He can be recognized by his clothes with a short cloak and beret and the objects he carries, a school bag and a writing case. And if you're in doubt, above the door is written, "This is the school," in German. And in the next image from the same manuscript, he is seen trampling these school things. There is on the ground the school bag with his books, his papers, and the double writing case out. The inscription gives an explanation why he threw the school bag away. His thoughts were only in faraway lands. And we might remember this state of mind from when we were 14. The school bag, by the way, on the left bottom side of the slide is a real example found in the Black Forest in Germany from exactly the same date as the depiction. These two images come from an extraordinary source. It is an iconographic ego document, a costume book made by somebody personal for himself, showing his life in clothing. Actually, there are two of these books. They were made by father and son Matthäus and Veit Conrad Schwarz, and the dates of every single depiction is on the depiction itself, so they stretch the time between 1500 and 1550 globally. And the books have about 10 school scenes altogether. They show both the first steps of learning how to write and, I think uniquely, the habit of skipping school in summer. And the books together provide a good image of education as a whole and the role of material culture in it. And as these are not only depictions with objects in them, but they have text and inscriptions with these objects, the source itself is multidisciplinary. And my research was that as well. My paper today will consist of 5 parts. I will start with a short overview of medieval and Renaissance education and its sources. I will then show you the excavations of schools on the continent and in England. I will show you depictions of masters and pupils, and I will try to combine them into an image of school as a way of life. And at the end I will post some conclusions on school attendance and literacy. Let me start with a very, very short historical overview. Schools were not new in the Middle Ages. There were already schools called ludus in Europe in Roman times. And as you well know, in the Carolingian Renaissance of the 8th and 9th century, there was a rule that there should be a school in every parish. And I think we should maybe try better to look for these Carolingian schools in the future. But today I will be speaking about what I would call the latest Middle Ages, or the early modern era combined, the period of circa 1300 to circa 1600 AD. And in the Netherlands and on most of the northern part of the continent, up to the 13th century, the education was completely controlled by the church. But from 1290 onwards, and especially in the 14th and 15th centuries, these schools came under secular authority. And this resulted in a heyday for schooling around 1500. And in the course of the 16th century, there was a lot of changes towards a more diverse image of schooling, and I will try to end my talk there. There were a number of types of basic education, and by basic education I mean learning to read and write and count. There's a lot more to education, of course, than that. The basics could be found in homeschooling for elite, but also for others in specific circumstances. There was, of course, a monastic education for novices, an education directed primarily at educating new monastic people. But there was also a primary school in every neighborhood of a late medieval town, and also in smaller villages. And these primary schools were mostly led by women, especially lay women. And the interesting part is that these schools, these primary schools, seem to have functioned as some sort of early daycare as well. Then, of course, there is, and we see most of that today, secondary schools, which are mainly grammar schools. But these schools offered an octava, an 8 class, or a nulla, a 0 class, for those children coming to the grammar school that could not yet read and write, and they could still learn it there. And even universities all sort of offered a pre-artes class, a class for boys who were not yet ready to go into the arts faculty, the lowest faculty, because of their lack of fluency in writing and reading and speaking Latin. So even without your basic education, you could get into the university. And there was also a Sunday school offered to children of working class who, for obvious reasons, could not attend daily classes. So the education of medieval children is well studied. For the Netherlands, the work of Post, more than half a century old, is still unsurpassed. For England, for instance, among very many others, Andrew Leach and Nicholas Orme are well known for their work on schools, and there is literally a bookcase of other literature on the topic. But most historical research does not give an idea of how life at schools was on a day-to-day basis. What did a classroom actually look like on the inside? How were masters and pupils dressed? What equipment did they use for reading, writing and counting? And how did they fill the hours between the lessons? A multidisciplinary research published in 2008, and this is a book I'll put to the library upstairs later on, aimed to fill this gap by investigating late medieval and early modern material school culture. The evidence for the practical aspects of schooling can be found primarily in two types of sources used relatively seldomly: archaeological finds of school equipment or of learning equipment from school sites, and depictions in art showing teaching in progress. Of course, some school buildings have been preserved as well, even only partly, and all kinds of texts, all kinds of different types of written sources do mention objects too, and give an insight in material culture as well. A good example of a school assemblage comes from the excavations that were carried out in the city of Groningen in the north of Holland in 1995 at the site of the former St. Martin's Latin School. And a Latin school is the Dutch and German word for your grammar schools. Here in Groningen, a large cesspit of 9 times 4 meters was discovered, bigger than this room, that contained lots of small things that were either lost or thrown away in this school shortly after 1500. The find pattern from this cesspit was extraordinary. It revealed almost only items used for eating, learning and play. These include various writing equipment, such as pens and inkwells, remains of wax tablets and book bindings, next to wooden spoons and pocket knives, children's shoes and a belt, and toys like spinning tops, knuckle bones, marbles, a ball and blowpipes. And I will show you the blowpipes just to make sure you recognize them. Even a knitted hat of a type well known from portraits of teachers and scholars was unearthed. And you know that type of headdress from depictions of Luther and Erasmus and other Renaissance scholars. The toy finds from the Latin school of Groningen give exactly the same impression of play in between the lessons as the autobiographical costume books of the Schwarz boys I already showed you. These manuscripts show the games the authors used to play in their spare hours at the grammar school of Augsburg, both in winter on your left and in summer. And on the right image you will see the spinning tops in the circle, and you will see marbles more in the background, and the hoop, of course, in the front. And in 1523, Erasmus of Rotterdam wrote a book of scholarly conversations called the Colloquia that was meant for practice by schoolboys at Latin schools and meant to appeal to the specific interests of the schoolboys. Thus, the themes of the conversations are daily life at school and especially the games played there. The sections bear headings such as De Pila, on the ball, and De Tali, on knucklebones. Also, this famous book is in line with the finds from the grammar school and with the depictions in the Schwarz costume books. And the three sources together provide a detailed overview of a schoolyard of 5 centuries ago. There is a number of other school dialogues giving details of life at school. And I'm showing you a school text of Torrentinus, printed in Zwolle in the Netherlands around 1505, with on the last page a handwritten dialogue by an unknown author. And this may well have been the schoolmaster, as they used to compose their own dialogues for the children to practice their Latin. And in this case there's 2 schoolboys called Ciriscus and Petrellus, and they talk about what they call boy things. And they mention many objects. Petrellus wants to play with nuts that he has bought by illegally pawning his writing tablet. At the end of the conversation, the church bell strikes 3 and they head for school. Ad scholam, nee, to the school, asks the first, and the other replies, imo ad carcerem, yes, indeed, to the dungeon. That's of course where my title of today came from. In the late Middle Ages, most grammar schools were boarding schools. Pupils were housed in special homes where they not only studied but also lived together. Also, this part of the daily life of schoolboys can be deduced from archaeological sources. In Zwolle, same Zwolle, in the east of the Netherlands close to the German border, excavations were carried out in the Domus Parva, the small house. This was a boarding house opened by the Brethren of Common Life in 1384 to house out-of-town pupils that attended the then famous grammar school led by Johannes Seele, known as Celius. In the 14th and 15th centuries, up to 50 pupils lived here together. It is known that at least some of the elder ones had a small room of their own. The excavations of 1986 revealed the waste of this school community, including a few items for learning like a writing pack, an inkwell, slate pencils, and fragments of slates. However, most finds are connected to life in the house more in general. There are many pisspots, storage jugs, cooking pans, window glass and floor tiles, dress accessories and door keys, shoes and pattens, beakers, cutlery, and even on the right hand side a shaving knife that indicates the age of the tenants. Remains of plants and animals from this site give away the boys' diet. That must have seen a lot of bread porridge, but it also held beef, pork and fowl and many different fruits. It will have been nicely spiced according to the many seeds of kitchen herbs found. The animal bones feature 8 cats, 4 dogs and a polecat that all died violently by a smack on the head. This shows that a cat slapper must have been active around the pupil's home. Also in this case, the finds can be combined with other sources. The many piss spots, for instance, in Zwolle and also in other boarding houses, give a tangible evidence of the note made in the preserved 1555 regulations of the School for Orphans in Bruges, in Belgium, where it is mentioned that at the month of October, 3 or 4 piss spots should be placed in each row of the dormitory for the coming winter, so that pupils wouldn't have to walk too far in their undershirts if they had, in the cold, if they had to pee at night. In the rest of Europe, other school excavations show a remarkably similar pattern. For instance, in this country, the Free Grammar School of Coventry, housed in reused buildings of the Whitefriars Abbey around 1550, tells a comparable story. From under the seating of the schoolboys, counters and dice were dug up, together with blunt arrowheads used for target practice, jugs and drinking glasses, penknives, a locket with a Madonna, a Jew's harp, and 12 inkwells, one with the initials HW. Most of these objects are complete, and the publication states, I quote, that the temptation to post the possessions of other scholars down the inviting cracks in the stall floors must have been irresistible. And just to show you, there's a lot of separate finds of learning and writing equipment in your country, and I'm showing you on the left side of the slide some finds of inkwells, a writing case, things like that, wax tablet, from the City of London, as they are kept in the Museum of London. The oldest school excavated dates from before 1370. It was found at the St. Lambert Square in Liège, in the French-speaking part of Belgium, and consisted of two rooms directly accessible from the cloister. And these rooms were used as a school at least until the 18th century, in the same spot and with the same size of rooms. The finds here include 9 writing packs, slates with scratches, a buzzer, left bottom down, I'll show you, which is used with 2 strings, and you turn it around in your hands, and then it buzzes really loudly. And there's glazed ceramic marbles, but there's also window glass and ceramic flags showing a checkered pattern of the floor of this school. So this is the first part of my evidence. The inventory of finds from school sites shows that pupils wrote with writing packs on wooden wax tablets or with slate pens on slates. And these things went together. Preserved tablets and slates show that these were used for exercises, mostly in Latin, but also for counting, scribbling, and making small sketches. And of course, a bit of educated fun is present too, like the inscription on a slate found in Leiden with ego stultus, I am stupid. But there was more permanent writing in schools too, witnessed by pieces of parchment and paper, pen tops and inkwells. The amount of the latter shows that they cannot possibly have been used only by teachers. For counting, casting counters were used. As excavations in the grammar school of Leiden in the Netherlands yielded a folding rule, it is possible that more instruments were used for maths. And being the teacher's hope preeminently, the paddle or rod is a school find too. In between the lessons, pupils had meals and time to play. Favorite games included balls, knucklebones, spinning tops, marbles and tit-cats. These were popular playthings in these days anyhow, as I already showed in my PhD thesis on medieval toys in 1998. That these games were taken into the classroom illegally is indicated by the Groningen blowpipes that were suspiciously undamaged amongst all kinds of broken toys. And it's not hard to imagine that the flying of pellets got annoying at some point and that teachers confiscated these instruments and threw them away. A more general listing of school equipment indicates that the alphabet was generally learned from horn books, although they have never been found in grammar school contexts. And that's not a surprise, as pupils who came there already knew the basics. And this shows that to some extent, even the level of schooling can be deduced from archaeological finds. The material school culture, as known from archaeological finds, is mirrored in the details of depicted school scenes. One of the oldest is from the region of Liège, like the school I showed you, and this might be my favorite manuscript in your British library. It's a book of hours from around 1300, made in the neighborhood of Maastricht. The school scene I'm showing you is of course a parody. There are monkeys in the school in place of humans. And it's essential that monkey schools like this one are parodies, for these images show what exactly was needed to make something recognizable as a school. There is a master monkey on the chair on the right in a cloak. There are small monkeys before him with books in their hands, in their paws, and on the left side one monkey is being chastised by a master with a rod on his bare back. And every viewer in the 14th century would immediately have seen that this is a school. And scenes like this are very common as the title pages of school texts. And you may know that school texts with room for annotations are very numerous amongst the first printed books. And these depictions are the same basic pattern. There's a teacher with a cloak and a beret sitting on a higher chair with a rod in his hand or another instrument of punishment. And there are pupils sitting before him with books. This makes it enough to be a school scene. But school scenes like this can become surprisingly informative. I have singled out for you a school master actually as a depiction of the children of Mercury in a series of the 7 planets. And you see that there is all kinds of details about clothing, about material culture, even a school bag in this specific depiction. And I'm not sure that a historian of education would normally go to sources like this for information like this. But as you can see, there is a lot of information hidden in these depictions. And depictions of school also occur accompanying the descriptions of the lives of important persons. And then we see Aristotle or St. Augustine or Mary or the Christ child being taken to school or being taught in school. And they are always carrying alphabet, tablets or books or school baskets or school bags. And I'll just point out a number of these for you. And the last one is a writing tablet with the black wax on, of course. These pictures are, as you can see, a stereotype. And this stereotype is showing that in the minds of late medieval people, wisdom always originated in education. And that education was normally found in a school outside the house with other pupils. The school scene has a fixed place in some series of illustrations too. You already saw the Mercury from a series of the 7 planets, and school also comes with depictions of virtues and vices, for instance with temperance. In series with the ages of man, very popular in the later Middle Ages and the 16th century, youth is usually depicted as school time. And this manuscript now in New York on your left shows one of the most beautiful and recognizable school children I know from the period. And he is of course characterized by the word puer, child, which is in the series, the name for this period, but he is characterized by material culture again, the school bag, his writing tablet, and the writing pad he is holding towards the tablet. And on the right side you see the month of February from a book of hours in the National Library of France, where again the second phase of life is attached to the second month of the year, and you have the same details of school life as you already saw in the monkey school, with the teacher sitting on a chair and the children before him, and the scene of being punished on the other side. It seems that these two scenes belong together. In series of the 7 liberal arts, grammar is usually depicted as a schoolmistress. The word grammatica is a female word, and therefore this specific image gave way to an image type of an attending female teacher instructing a child. And she is always helping the child to read, with her hand pointing in the book towards the letters and holding an attribute of punishment at the same time. And on the left you see her holding a paddle on the famous Peterborough ceiling, and on the right you see her holding a rod. Images of teachers, pupils and school in all kinds of other contexts are common as well. And my favorite, although it's a bit gothic in a way, is this teacher on the left being killed by his pupils with their school equipment. This is Saint Felix, and Saint Felix was became a saint. He was a teacher at a school at the Pincio in Rome. That's where the British School of Rome is, and he had a school there in late Roman times, according to his vita, his life description. And when his pupils found out he was a Christian, they actually were instructed to kill him. And they used all their school equipment to kill him. That's what the text only says with their writing gear. But this Flemish manuscript illuminator got to lengths to show you all kinds of school equipment used for this. So there is school baskets, sort of school bags, but then a basket. We've seen them before. There is also a bag hanging on the left side. There is pieces of parchment, an inkwell. He's also using a bag to hit. And of course, in between all these things, it's the penknife that would serve the best, I guess. There is a real sort of catalogue of school equipment from the 15th century in this painting. And again, it's not where you would have searched for information on schooling. So the images of masters, pupils and lessons can be found in both suspected themes and with sort of suspected artists, but also in very strange places, in very separate depictions. And in the same way, objects were found both in school contexts and as very separate finds. For instance, the writing tablet from the school at Bois-le-Duc on the right side, which has now turned out to be from the cemetery side, sort of in between the church and the school, which would make sense, I think. What is evident from the omnipresent images and remains of school life is that to pupils, of course, school was never a side dish. Boys spent more time with their classmates than with their family, as nowadays, by the way. And this was increasingly so when they boarded school and also lived together. And you see on the slide on the left and top right hand side, and also the picture with the shirt and shoes, things from the school of Alpiusbach in the Black Forest in the south of Germany. And you see on the top right side the dormitory And there's all kinds of inscriptions, and they have been made visible using ultraviolet lighting. And these are actually poems containing also the names of pupils, the date they put it there, and things like Friends Forever. So they left their marks on their dormitories in this school. School was and has always been a whole way of life. And this means that in the later Middle Ages and early modern era, a specific image existed of school children, of how they look and what they carry. And this image was mostly based on a specific material school culture. And this manifest of their identity made the school children recognizable on the streets. And as they must have come in significant numbers, at least in towns, and made a lot of noise, as we know from law texts and statutes, the groups of school children were impossible to ignore. So this is the other part of my evidence. Added to what was known from excavations, the images yielded a general idea of the buildings in which lessons were given and the fittings of the rooms. Usually only one room is visible, however many pupils are shown. The common devices of these images are beamed roofs, tiled floors, think of the tiles from Liège, and composite glazed windows. Teachers sit in high wooden chairs, usually with some sort of desk in front of them, not unlike your president, by the way. Pupils often sit in long benches, sometimes with a common desk in front, not unlike yourself, or on small stools, like René. In most cases, the classroom seems to be attached to a corridor, an open space, or another building. The depictions show clearly that pupils brought their own equipment to school, carried in bags, baskets, or wooden cases. Most school bags are simple sacks that could be pulled to at the top, but also leather bags with a belt over one shoulder have been depicted. The writing case, consisting of an elongated case for pens and a smaller cover for an inkwell, joined by straps and worn from the belt, is a feature of schoolboys, as it is for all those who spent their days writing. This adds to the idea that pen and ink were often used in school. As for clothes, what is seen worn indoors by pupils does not really differ from what was worn by anyone. And teachers are dressed like other scholars, wearing warm doctor's robes and hats, like anyone who has to sit still for a long time. When schoolboys are shown outside on their way to school, they almost always wear short cloaks and hats. And the short cloak, the beret and the school bag became the image of the schoolboy way into the 19th century. And I'm not sure the cookies are known in this country, but the cookies called Le Petit Écolier, the small schoolboy from France from the second half of the 19th century, still show this image, even to today. Although also cloaks and hats were commonly worn, they seem to have been a fixed part of the standard school uniform, so they could be recognized wearing this. Something of a very different nature is shown by the images as well, and that is the generality of education. Both lessons and children on their way to school were depicted many times in all kinds of settings, meant to show both the elite and the commoner. And I would like to point out as well that archaeology is about all layers of society, not about elite. Especially not, actually. So apparently no explanation was ever needed with these depictions. And this indicates that schooling was well known and very recognizable in the later Middle Ages. What's important is that these images also show both boys and girls at school, and they show male and female teachers, and they also show them together in one room. And if you look to the regulations, you find that especially in the northern and southern Netherlands, a lot of effort has been taken to allow girls to attend the same school as boys. This includes things like girls arriving half an hour earlier and leaving half an hour earlier, so the boys and girls will not be together in the schoolyard, just in the classroom where you can keep an eye on them. And it also involves separate rooms or separate sort of floors in schools for girls to have the lessons together with the boys, but not physically in the same room. So the image would be something like this: a very crowded room, divided into gender and age groups. And in this case you see the girls on the downstairs floor with slightly older female group attendants or teachers, and on the top floor you see the boys also in groups with slightly older group attendants like tutors. I'll show you one of these tutors and I'll show you that he's actually carrying a dagger, and that was something that children could not do but teachers could. Here. And of course there is the teacher hearing pupils on the left top side. And you can see there's a boy and a girl waiting their turn to say their lessons. No. Although we tend to lump all of the Middle Ages together, 3 centuries is a long time. And through time, teaching changed, along with the society in which schools functioned. For my country, the Netherlands, the most important change starts in 1290, when Floris V, Count of Holland, presented the town of Dordrecht with the rights to their own already existing grammar school. And this very school, by the way, is being excavated as we speak. This meant that from then on, not the clergy, but the city council was in charge of the school. They appointed masters and inspectors, determined school fees and created curriculums. In the course of the 14th century, it became a trend in the Netherlands and Germany to transfer schools from the authority of the church to the lay authorities. The cities actively tried to create good schools and developed some kind of policy for that. Often their goal seems to have been to make education accessible for a broad population, with Sunday schools for working youth and programs waiving school fees for the poor. Another major change can be detected from around 1500 onwards, when daily practice at school changed under the influence of incomparable factors such as humanism, the Reformation and the introduction of printing. Schools began to use more and new school texts as books quickly became more accessible. New ways of thinking and the new religion all tried to use education for their own purposes, mostly by supplying new material and new teachers to the same schools, thus changing the contents but not the context. From the end of the 15th century, schooling became thus more readable and writable. This is reflected by the quickly increasing amounts of writing implements seen and found in schools after 1500. In all kinds of ways, schooling became even more material in the 16th century than it had already been. And at this point I would quickly lift the corner of the field on my current research into the material culture of student life at universities. It was, to my surprise, completely missing from the library of literature on universities. And I can say that in Boersij, so the homes of students, much of the same stuff was found. For eating, but drinking now as well, for learning or rather studying, for play but not spinning tops but rather dice, and a fair range of weapons worse than a pocket knife. And iconographical sources show many depictions of students and scholars. And of course they are in obvious places like the title page of university texts. But they are also in strange places again, like the images showing the 12-year-old Christ discovered in the temple among the doctors. And it turns out that in these depictions, these doctors around him are not a random depiction, but they carefully show the clothes of every single faculty of the universities, so that all of wisdom is present and surpassed by the wisdom of Christ. And these are quite promising first results for something I hope will result in a book in some sort of 5 years' time. Dear fellows, I've come to my conclusions. At least in the towns of the later Middle Ages in the Netherlands and Germany, half of the people learned to read, write and count, and half didn't. I realize that that's quite a claim, but it's not only suggested by the amount and the character of depictions and finds. Factual numbers to go with it have been supplied by historical research carried out by my colleague Attervoort at the Free University in Amsterdam, and already presented by him at the 2005 Leeds International Medieval Congress. He combined preserved 16th century lists of children who went to the city schools of 4 Dutch cities with the head counts of the population of those cities at the same time. And even if all numbers are treated with the utmost care and sense of perspective, they still indicate that in these towns, around 1500, more than half of the boys went to school. And it should be kept in mind that the counting by Attervoort does not include all other possible types of education. It's just that half of the boys of the city went to one city grammar school. In the 16th century, the Italian traveler Lodovico Guicciardini wrote that, I quote, "In the Low Countries everybody can read and write, even the peasants." He may have been exaggerating a bit, but we now know that the situation in the Netherlands did differ significantly from what he was used to at home in Italy. The results of my research, like that of Attervoort, challenge existing ideas about the accessibility of schools, and therefore of the degree of literacy in the latest Middle Ages. Even for underprivileged groups like the poor, orphans and girls, education was most attainable. I think we might just as well get used to the idea that it was not uncommon for a medieval child to go to school. To learn the basics and more, a child didn't have to belong to a secular or ecclesiastical elite. We might even consider thinking the other way around, replacing the assumption that nobody could learn anything in the Middle Ages except by a challenging question: who had no access to education and why not? Thank you for your kind attention.